This is Joseph Cilio, President of the Board of Education speaking. Thank you for attending in person or through Zoom. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Nation under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Due notice of today's meeting is reserved to all members of the Board of Education pursuant to the requirements of law. Tina, will you please take attendance? Present. 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 Present.
Present. Present. Present.
We're going to move now to the 2024-2025 proposed budget.
Thank you, Mr. Cilio. So typically at this time, with our first session, we present to you a proposed budget, but this is just giving you tonight, we're going to be talking about giving you an overview of our budget process and some things that have impacted our budget. One thing I will tell you is that Mr. Capio has calculated the tax cap. So we'll definitely have that number for you this evening. We always start our, anything we do with our mission and vision, and this is no different with our budget. We hold true to our mission and vision, which you have seen many, many times. So the budget development process took this into consideration. So this evening, we will be talking about some of the changes that at the state level, the impact of that on our district, and we'll give you some information, some updated information about our district, talk about our priorities and how we develop this budget, things that we look at very closely, enrollment, scheduling, programs. And then Mr. Capio is going to talk about the tax cap calculation, revenue and reserves, and then we'll talk about our next meeting that's for the budget. So, the big picture from the state, there's been two major changes at the state level, which has been the calculation of the foundation aid. So although there was an increase with the foundation aid, you can see there at it's $824 million. There was, when that was calculated, it's actually a decrease for the schools because it should be $824 million plus the reduced amount, which is $420 million. And that's because of the calculation of the CPI. The CPI is at 4.3%, 4.1%, and the governor, when she did her calculation, she reduced it by 2.4%. Is that 2.4? 2.4 reduced. So that's why that, even though that's an increase of $824 million, it really should be 1.2, a little over $1.2 million. So that's something, that formula that has been used to calculate for, all these years, that was changed this year. And it was the first time that that was taken into account. And then the other area where, I think it's the next slide, the foundation aid. So with the foundation aid, we have all the information there, and this is right from the state website in terms of how this was calculated through the NSBA website. So the foundation aid, you can see that they use different ratios to calculate the foundation aid, which is, looking at wealth, looking at our weighted student pupil, which is our special ed students, our ENL students, to calculate that amount. So the foundation aid, when that's calculated, what it is that you should, typically we've always gotten, which is the save harmless, that rule that's applied. Again, this has been happening for many, many years, is that we will never get less than what we received the previous year. And in fact, we always get a little bit more than that because of inflation. There are many things that account for the, getting a little bit more. This year, that foundation aid, many districts, including ours, we receive less. So the The amount over that we received last year was 50% decrease for us this year. So the impact for us is a little over $100,000. But if you think about it, it should be even, it's a decrease of even a little bit more than that, because we should be getting our foundation aid from last year plus increase with the inflation comes into account for this. Did I miss anything with that, Mr. Capua?
No, I mean, I think you covered it very well. I think the important takeaways is that with the governor's proposal, it's just a proposal. It's not in law yet. Obviously it has to go through the tri-party process and, before it becomes official. The two major surprises here, what Dr. Sinha was referring to, is what happened with the foundation aid formula and Save Harmless. The difference with the foundation aid formula, so for the last 2 years, we've been hearing about bringing foundation aid to fully fund foundation aid, fully fund the formula. And that is something that has been, discussed and in the papers and all sorts of, good information on that. And that's what's happened over this last 2 years. What happened is with this particular proposal, they take the formula, which is supposed to have CPI as one of the factors, and they just artificially decrease CPI from the 4.1, what it should have been, to the 2 point. And that decreased the amount of money available to foundation aid all out throughout the whole district. So that was the first surprise. And the other, again, is the Save Harmless. And with the Save Harmless, what that basically means is that a district would get no less than what they got the prior year in foundation aid. So what Dr. Sinha had talked about, so for the 824 million, you can see 507 of that is foundation aid, 318 million is in expense-based aids. So there was no change in formula to the expense aid side. It just was on the foundation aid formula side. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So some information that we give you every year about our district, our enrollment, our current enrollment is 3,951 students. We have 24 out of district students. These are our special needs students, and 38 students in our universal pre-K program. Some numbers that are not there are students that are attending parochial schools, private and parochial schools, students who we provide health services to, and then also special education students that we are district of location. And so students from other districts, if they attend, special needs students attend schools within our district boundaries, we also provide services for them. We have over 680 full-time employees, but over 900 total. We have, again, 7 buildings, school buildings. We have the administration and our bus garage. We are one of the few districts that we have our own district fleet, and we also contract buses. So our bus depot is a pretty large operation here in our district. We also have 2 cafeterias in both our middle school and our high school, and our lunch milk program at our primary and our elementary schools. And we also have a AAA bond rating, which is the highest, and we've received that status for the past, I would say, several years. So we're proud of that. So as we develop this budget, we really make sure that we keep our students at the center of our decision making. We're responsive to our school community feedback. This means our students, our parents, and our staff. And we want to ensure that we are looking at the whole child. Our students are well connected in our schools, that they feel safe and supported. We are preserving our current programs and expanding our opportunities for kids, particularly in the academic and social emotional programs. We are always striving to maximize the use of space in our buildings. And with technology, we're prioritizing the infrastructure. We've done quite a bit in the last several years with our technology infrastructure. We want to make sure it's robust and evolving with our with the needs of our students. And then with our facilities, just talked about, we have 9 facilities in our schools. So we want to make sure that they're clean, safe, and well maintained. So that's something that we ensure that we're working on it and the budget, is in line with those, beliefs. So this chart here, this, infographic, and at the center is where you have our, Garden City School Board adopts the proposed budget for voter approval. There's a lot that comes into when we're developing the budget. You have all your labor agreements. Those are all your contractual obligations. You have the mandates, the state, federal, those are pensions, things with transportation. We take input from our community, changes in our local assessed values. That's the taxes, the state aid and grants we take into account, the CPI. Mr. Capio was talking about that a little bit before. State and local program changes. These are your state testing, things related to curriculum, special education, ENL, and staff input. And that's really around enrollment, changes, courses, and course selections, rather. So part of our, we're going to share with you how we build a budget, step A and step B. So with step A, what we do is we look at our current budget. What do we have? And as we build a budget, our budget process, we have the new budget. We get the vote on in May. We literally start working on the budget cycle, never ends for us. And we start heavily into this process in early fall, meeting with our administrators, department heads, and really kind of looking at, analyzing our programs. So we review programs, our services. Ms. McLaughlin meets with our administrators around staffing to see, looking at courses very carefully. We also identified changes in our enrollment, which I'll share with you in a little bit. Remember, every 2 years, we get a demographic study completed. So this is another year. This was the year we updated our demographic study, and we haven't received the report. We have a draft report, but we'll be sharing that with the board and our public. We also include all of our mandated increases, and there's, anything that comes up that we have to do, whether like this year, there's been some new trainings. Well, we have to make sure we adhere to all these mandated requirements. And then we look at our current program and look at where there are efficiencies. And that's probably a place that that we are constantly looking at ways where can we find more efficiencies. And we, of course, explore new programs when we discuss the budget further, and particularly in instruction part 1, you'll hear some additional program options for our students that we share with. So this is a draft enrollment projection. And here you can see that if you look at the bottom, K-12, the change, you can see for this year, our enrollment was at 3,941. If you look at 6th grade, you see that bubble, that's the 384. We had an increase in our 6th grade. We discussed that last year when we were developing the budget. So our demographic study helps us to plan for enrollment. So if you look further in 26, 27, and 20, it's 27, 28, and 29, you see an increase, like the bubble, like we're going up to 4,055. These numbers, they've increased, but they're sprinkled throughout the district. So it's not just in one place. That 6th grade is definitely a bubble, and we plan for that. The demographic study helped us to plan for that for our incoming 6th graders this year. So, so this gives us, and if you look at this in October of 2033, which is, or 2033, where, this states that we'll be at 3,912, which is less than where we are. So you see this ebb and flow with our enrollment. Okay. So building the budget, step B, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. DeCaprio. She's going to go over this portion, our tax cap calculation, and our revenue and reserve, and a little bit with the reserves. One thing I do want to mention is that although we don't have our budget, you don't have the actual numbers, we do have our tax cap, which is at 2.54%. Ms. DeCaprio is going to go over that. And we're still balancing our budget. So hopefully we'll have the numbers for you in a draft of that at the next meeting or the following meeting. Mr. DeCaprio?
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. So that was a good summary of the work we do, starting in late September and following through the fall and into the winter. It's true. We always say that there's a time in, like, let's say September, October, when we are starting the new year's, the following year's budget process. We're working in the current budget and we're closing the books on the prior year. So there's never a point that we're only working in one year's budget. And this is talks about that process. So thank you. So what Dr. Sinha was going through was really a lot of the work we do on finalizing the expense side of the budget. That is what we use to work with our administrators, our cabinet staff, and all of our vendors, finding out what the increases look like for next year. Where we're doing salary projections, and we're doing all of that work to really figure out the roll forward budget of what's needed. After we have that, we start to look at staffing needs, enrollments, and everything else, in really analyzing the expense side of the budget. While we're doing that, at the same time, we're looking at revenue. So I've talked about this 100 times, that revenue and expenses, they need to match. And this is what we're talking about today. Because we're not done with the expense side of the budget, we're also not done with the revenue side, because we need to see what that final number is. And that's what we're working towards. We're getting very close, but we're not quite there yet. So we do the revenue determination, we look at state and local, we look at our tax cap levy, what we're allowed to increase the levy by. We look at the gap in between, and we really circulate back and forth between that as we look at non-program changes, staffing, and so on. So starting with the tax cap, we've talked about this in the past, but I think it's important to note that the tax cap has been around now for well over 11 years, I think it is, of it.
Yes.
So
2011.
It's an 8-step process that gives you the maximum allowable amount that you can raise in taxes with having a typical budget needing a simple majority. So it's a simple majority of 50% plus one vote. If the district chose or opted, or the Board of Education, to go above that, you would need a supermajority, which requires the 60% voting. We have not been faced with that. There's all sorts of information on contingency budgets if one of them wasn't to vote pass. But this is the 8-step formula as it's laid out, and we'll go through what this means to us. So for the 24-25 tax levy cap, it's calculated at 2.54%, or an increase of just under 2.8 million. It's 2,776,230. There's a lot of factors that go into the increase, and I really laid them out here of how we add up to the levy increase that we have that's allowable. The first we talk about is the tax-based growth factor. That's the amount of brick and mortar improvements that is assigned to Garden City from the Office of Real Property Taxes. We get that from the assessor's office. It's not something we come up with. And it has to do with the actual construction increases in the properties within the township village, excuse me. The 1.030036 equates to just over 393,000. The change in CPI, which is later on down in the calculation, it's about midway through. That change in CPI on the adjusted tax levy comes to 2.1 million, 2,173,000. The tax levy calculation is impacted by the change in pilot properties. We are projecting a small decrease in our pilot payments for next year, and that equates to an increase in the levy, in the tax levy calculation of 67,000. The last thing we have, the two last things, is the capital tax levy. We have a small increase in the tax levy exclusion of 127,330. That is the difference between what we're projecting we will spend in all capital projects and debt service, netted out against our building aid. And it's not just that building aid, there's also some transportation aid that's calculated in there as well for any equipment equated to there. So the difference is 127,000. And then there's this very small exclusion for ERS of 14,000. All of that equates to the increase of the 2,776,000. Just to give you a history of CPI going back the 10 years or so, I didn't go back all the way to the beginning, but you can see that CPI as used in the 2% calculation, it really is 2% or CPI, whichever is less. So it cannot be above 2%, but we have seen it much lower. It's been as low as 16, 17 as 0.12%. So you can see that in the last 3 years, we've been dealing with inflation that's quite a bit higher than the 2%, but 2% goes into the levy calculation. Moving on to revenue. So as I said, a lot of our work also has to do with going through our revenue sources. This lists the revenues that are just in the major groups here, which is state aid, local, pilots, appropriation and reserves, and property taxes. This is a summary of what we are proposing on some of the aid categories. The two that are not completed yet is the appropriation from reserves and the property tax levy. Our plan is to stay within the cap. We do not plan to come out with a levy above. We will be at the 2.54. In fact, we expect to be just around there. I didn't put it in. We could put the 2,770,000, but it might be off by a couple of dollars. So we'll just finalize that as soon as it's all finished, but it will be within the tax cap. These other categories, the state aid, local revenue, and pilots, and all the others, I'm going to go into a little more detail. So starting with the top line where you see the state aid, we're estimating from 10,515 up to 10,801. And this is the breakdown of how we get to those figures. So you can see that we do have a decrease in the foundation aid formula, the foundation aid allotted to the school district, plus a couple of other aid factors. We do, when we back out, when we do our revenue projections, we are required to pay a local share for a portion of it. So that's netted out. These are actual revenues that we believe we will see on the foundation aid that was reported as part of the governor's budget. You can see that we have an increase in building aid, and I talked a little bit about that during the tax cap calculation. The building aid is a reduction to the amount that we could raise in taxes. It comes in as revenue here, so it's not used again. It actually reduces the capital exclusion. So that 756,000 is it nets out on the tax levy cap calculation. Transportation, BOCES, are relatively flat. Transportation's down a little bit. That's just more in line with where we are projecting our contracts to end at the end of the year and our expenses. So that gets trued up a little bit, and that's where we are with that. BOCES is a slight increase, and that's really tied to services that we have been using with BOCES and what's projected. Special education has a small increase. That has to do with excess cost aid for our high cost students. We do get aided on those. We also get increased expenses on it, so those really wash against that. And the last part of it, which is textbook, computer, library, and hardware, those are our, those aids are just the instructional aids, and there's really no changes to that. Those are truly just tied to enrollment, and our enrollment is pretty flat. So if you look back on this, the second line, which is local revenues, we're moving from 1,717,000 to 1,902,000. And this is the breakdown on here. We are projecting some increases here, health services. So we provide health services to the end, special education services to the non-public schools that are in Garden City. And then we bill back district children that do not go to, do not live in Garden City. So we have 3 very active private schools. We have, a good amount of students, and the health services and the tuition services. So the health services is for the nursing and psychological services and so on. The tuition services, that's more for the special education services that we bill back to other districts. So district of location, district of residence, there's a lot of rules about that, and the district of residence is required to provide those services and bill, district of location and bill back the resident district. We are increasing our interest on deposits. We continue to forecast a positive outlook on our investments, and we do feel confident that we can increase that. And then other than that, everything else is really relatively the same. Moving on to the fund balance and other property. We did, as I said before, we did not put the final number in on the real property taxes because we don't have the exact number yet. We're waiting for that to be finalized, but it will be within the tax cap. We are not looking to pierce it this year or anything like that. So that is there. Then we move on to the appropriated reserves. We have the workers' comp reserve that we are appropriating $450,000. That's the max that we can appropriate out of that reserve. That's to pay for the claims, the tail claims for our workers' comp services. And then what we are still working on is the ERS and the TRS reserves. Currently, we appropriate $550 and $200 out of those reserves. We are planning on balancing and moving up those reserve appropriations to help balance the budget. Having no increase in state aid and relatively flat other revenue sources, we do plan to tap into our reserves. We are looking at this, and we need to obviously be careful of it over time, but we have been lucky enough to be able to save in these, to be able to offset some of the years when we need it. And we feel that this will be an area that we will be recommending a higher allocation. We still have money in our debt service fund that we've been appropriating out $150,000 a year, and we can continue that. And then the fund balance allocation of the 2.6, we have looked at our fund balance, and we are projecting that we will be able to allocate that as well for next year's budget to offset the tax levies. I just want to highlight that the $399,000, I broke that out. If you look at our budget brochure, our fund balance allocation was $2,999,000. That's the combination of those two lines. The capital fund was a one-time revenue of projects that came in under budget. We took that money, it transferred back into our general fund, and then we allocated it back out to capital again. So one-time revenue, one-time expense that will not renew, and I think it looks clearer having it broken out here. And I will hand it back to Dr. Sinha to go over the budget calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Capua. So our next meeting is on February 27th. And I put tentative overview of the proposed budget. We gave you the tax cap number, but we're still waiting for some of our expenditures and some of our other revenues, I should say, that help us to balance our budget. And we hope to have those numbers for you for the 27th. If we don't, we're going to give you all the numbers that we have. If not, then it'll be March 7th. Okay. And again, give you all the updates. We want to make sure this presentation will be up on our website We'll have a budget tab right on the front of our website. So anything we present or share, we want to make sure that our community members have the same information.
Thank you. At this time, are there any questions from the board? We'll move to citizens' questions. Yeah, you off the mic, and just give us your name and address.
So it seems to me that right now. And I don't want to research. And it was last year, NASA, first increase. Villages. But I don't know when you're reflecting. Financial statement. $13,000. And then also. And then your regular health. 35,000. So, appreciate. And also I know. Things, so if you think about. Worst case. Utilizing. I.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Started in using. And comes out. But what I'm curious about is that relationship parties. also interesting. I wonder if so, and I know that in Jericho in particular. Close travel. I don't know.
It's a great question that you, or a situation you bring up. We do have a very strong in our district residency. So we actually, our registrar works very hard and we have systems in place to ensure students that come to our school, they actually live in our district. Yeah.
I'll-
So, you know, at this time, we've done initial thinking, but we have not done major planning because of, you know, we want to make sure that we can move forward with that. But our goal is to, you know, with the Bloomberg or the business center is to start off slower and build based on student enrollment.
Commercial rate for- I don't know. Entitlements or. That's.
Yeah, no, we understand. We're thinking through that. You know, we're well aware of the cost. Some of us here use it as well, and it's just, we know it's not inexpensive, but it is a key tool to any, you know, business, I guess, you know, business learning center at this point. So we're going to work through that and figure out what we can do. We're going to try to talk to Bloomberg and see if there's any discounts we can be offered. We've talked to some residents who
Yes.
work at Bloomberg's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to pull every string because we understand it's very expensive. Yeah. All the good stuff. Yeah.
So, and which- and first, what you. Like the schedule now. And you. So like, um, and, so we're. I. That on a fully loaded. basis. Okay. Know that.
Yes.
I think the answer is yes. Mr. Capua is probably better situated to answer that question. Maybe we can come back to you on that if that's okay.
Yeah, let's.
There.
Look at the information. Right. For someone less than 65. That price is much. Or because once they. So, and also. In Nassau County also. Was in higher. House.
Yeah.
both are- and it's just. That was all. And so I'll drop off.
Thank you.
Right?
Be great.
And it's also.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
You should consider joining our audit committee if you have some free time.
Look for a
Yeah.
vacancy.
Yeah,
There will be.
no, we will, we will.
It will be.
We will, we
We
will.
are losing one member, So appreciate your time. Since we have the bond vote going on at this time, may I have a motion that the Board of Education adjourns work session?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. We'll be coming back
We'll be
after,
coming-
we'll be coming back after we get the tally, the polls closed, we get the tally from.
Yeah, you do have the consent agenda. Do you want to take that or you want to
Actually,
wait?
we
You
could
can
do the
take
consent-
that. You'll be
We
done
can do
with
the
that
consent,
then.
maybe we'll do the
Yeah.
consent
Yeah.
agenda. Just we have a few minutes here. At this time, may I have a motion that the Board of Education, well, we already did that. Make more, excuse me, I'm one of those days. Make more efficient use of the meeting time. The Board of Education authorizes the use of a consent agenda as part of a meeting agenda. Consent agenda allows for one motion to approve multiple items as they are identified on the agenda. The President of the Board will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, and then we'll ask the board members if they wish to have a discussion or clarification on any specific items contained within the consent agenda. Following the discussions, the board will then vote on the consent agenda motion. In addition, the board member request to have an item removed from the consent agenda to vote on the motion separately. At this time, be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda, which includes business board items F1 and personnel matters G1 through G2 and bond capital reserve vote item H1.
So moved.
Second. Oh,
Just,
sorry, I have to remove the bond.
Yeah.
Sorry, the bond vote will take place after, so we're gonna strike that. The bond capital reserve item vote H1 will be on our return. So it's personnel matters G1 through G2 and board item F1. Motion,
So moved.
all in favor? Aye. Just a housekeeping item. Our next meeting, of the Board of Education will be Tuesday, February 27th at 8:15 PM at the Garden City High School. So we're gonna take a break and come back after we have the results of the bond capital reserve vote. Thank you.
Oh, that's a good question. Whatever. Oh. We can find out for you. We can find out for you from the. For sure. You'll find out. Yeah. When you come back. Yeah. Just send the patents, that one, that one. too. Okay, wanna go in that then?
Board of Education meeting. At this time, we'd like to read the results of the bond capital reserve vote. The totals were 637 votes yes and 207 votes no. So the bond vote has been approved. At this time, be it resolved that the Board of Education approves bond capital reserve vote item H1.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Time, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby ratifies a retirement incentive memorandum effective June 30th, 2024 with the Garden City Teachers Association.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, is there any further business of the board?
None for me. None.
May I have a motion that that being no further businesses to come before the board and that the meeting may be adjourned?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Got my message out, Lauren, too. Got my message out.